From the outside, we had the picture-perfect family. Olivia and I had been married for over 2 decades, sharing a life full of memories and raising 2 kids. Our son, Alex, had recently started university, and like many young adults, he formed close bonds with his new friends. One of those friends, Sam, quickly became a regular in our home. Alex and Sam were inseparable, attending parties, working on assignments together, and even going on summer vacations. Naturally, Alex often invited Sam over for dinners and family events, and before long, Sam was like a second son to us. Sam was the type of young man any parent would be proud of. He was tall, athletic, and charming, with the kind of confidence that drew people in. Olivia, my wife, seemed to take a particular interest in him. Initially, it didn't seem strange. She had always been friendly and warm with Alex's friends. But as time went on, I noticed her compliments about Sam becoming more frequent and oddly specific. She would comment on how well-dressed he was, how handsome he looked, and how successful he would be. She'd casually mention how young men like Sam were living the life, traveling to exotic places, driving nice cars, and attracting attention on social media. She seemed fascinated by this younger, more carefree world. At first, I brushed it off. Olivia had always been open about her admiration for successful people, and Sam was no exception. She often made similar remarks about celebrities and successful entrepreneurs. But there was something about how she talked about Sam that felt different, almost as if she was comparing him to me and finding me lacking. I dismissed the feeling, convincing myself that it was all in my head. After all, we had been happily married for years, and Olivia had never given me any real reason to doubt her. As time went on, though, her behavior became more noticeable. During family dinners, Olivia would often sit closer to Sam, leaning in as she laughed at his jokes or brushed her hand lightly against his shoulder. The way she interacted with him had a level of familiarity that made me uncomfortable. Sometimes, I caught Alex looking at them too, a flicker of confusion crossing his face, but like me, he never said anything. Sam, for his part, seemed completely oblivious or maybe just too polite to acknowledge it. It wasn't just dinners either. We'd have movie nights at home, and Olivia would insist on Sam sitting next to her. If Alex sat between them, she would find excuses to move around, offering snacks or drinks, creating opportunities to engage with Sam more closely. There were even moments when I thought I saw her glance at him when she thought no one was looking. A quick, almost imperceptible look that left me with a sinking feeling in my stomach. Despite these growing suspicions, I tried to push them aside. We were a family, and I didn't want to disrupt that. Besides, Sam was practically a kid compared to us. He was in his early 20s, and Olivia and I were in our 40s. The thought that there could be something more than a friendly bond between them seemed ridiculous, even to me. But as the weeks went by, the nagging doubt in my mind refused to fade. It wasn't until later that I realized how deep Olivia's interest in Sam had truly become. What started as small, seemingly harmless gestures soon began to evolve into something darker, something I never thought possible in our family. At the time, I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that nothing could be happening. But as much as I tried to ignore it, the cracks in our picture-perfect family were slowly starting to show. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. What I didn't know then was that those small, uncomfortable moments were just the beginning. The foundation of trust and love that Olivia and I had built over the years was about to be shattered in a way I could never have imagined, and the life I thought we shared was nothing but an illusion. As the months went by, Olivia's behavior became harder to ignore. What had once seemed like harmless comments and innocent gestures towards Sam began to feel more deliberate, more personal. It started small. She would linger a little too long when handing him something at dinner, or she'd laugh a little too loudly at his jokes. These things seemed trivial, but they didn't sit right with me. I noticed how her eyes lit up whenever Sam walked into the room, and how her mood would shift when he left. I didn't want to overreact, but it was becoming impossible to deny that something was changing. At first, I tried to rationalize it. After all, Sam was a handsome, successful young man. He was everything Olivia seemed to admire: confident, charming, and driven. But the closer I looked, the more it felt like Olivia's admiration for Sam was not the same as her interest in other young men we met. There was something more, something she was trying to hide behind her usual playful comments. The turning point came one night when we were all watching a movie together. Alex, as usual, sat next to Sam, and Olivia had positioned herself on the other side of him. Throughout the film, I noticed her subtly shifting closer to Sam. At one point, she leaned over to whisper something in his ear, and I saw her hand brush against his shoulder, lingering there for just a moment too long. My chest tightened as a feeling of dread washed over me. It was such a small gesture, but it felt loaded with meaning. What really set off alarm bells was her sudden interest in Sam's personal life. She started asking more about his daily routine, his dating life, even his family. Whenever Alex brought up a funny story about Sam, Olivia would press for more details, her attention laser-focused on Sam's every move. I began to feel like the third wheel in my own home. Olivia's fascination with Sam was now impossible to ignore. Then came the phone calls. It started innocently enough. Olivia had Sam's number saved for emergencies, especially if Alex was late coming home or if they were out together. But soon, I noticed her texting him more frequently. She always had an excuse. Just checking in on Alex, she'd say. Or, Sam was helping me plan a surprise for Alex. But these texts became more frequent, happening late at night, long after Alex was home and asleep. I overheard one phone call, her voice soft and secretive, as if she didn't want me to hear what she was saying. I started to question everything. Was it all in my head? Was I overreacting to what could be a harmless friendship? But the signs kept piling up. Olivia began to put more effort into her appearance, wearing clothes she hadn't worn in years, applying makeup even when we weren't going out. It was as though she was trying to impress someone, and deep down, I knew who that someone was. Despite my growing suspicions, I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to believe that I was imagining things, that our marriage was still strong. But every time I saw Olivia and Sam together, my doubts grew. It felt like I was watching my life from the outside, slowly unraveling in front of me, and I was powerless to stop it. The more I observed Olivia's behavior, the harder it became to ignore the growing distance between us. Her attention towards Sam felt inappropriate, even though no obvious boundaries had been crossed, at least not in front of me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something going on behind my back, something they didn't want me to see. Things took a turn when I accidentally stumbled upon the first real clue. One evening, Olivia left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs. A message notification popped up on the screen, Sam's name flashing in bold letters. I had never been the kind of husband who snooped through my wife's phone, but in that moment, curiosity got the better of me. My hand hesitated before picking it up, but the message preview was enough to make my heart race. It read, "Last day was fun. We should do it again soon. Same time?" My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Last day? I had been home with Olivia the night before. At least, I thought I had. She had gone to bed early, claiming she wasn't feeling well. I had assumed she was asleep, but now I wasn't so sure. The message wasn't explicit, but the tone suggested something far more personal than the usual friendly banter. My hands trembled as I placed the phone back where it was, suddenly feeling like I had intruded on something I wasn't meant to see. Over the next few days, I became hyper-aware of Olivia's phone habits. She was more secretive than usual, always keeping her phone close by, even taking it with her when she went to the bathroom. Late-night texts to Sam became more frequent, and though I couldn't read them, I could sense that the content was far from innocent. She was careful, never leaving her phone unattended again, but I had already seen enough to confirm my worst fears. One night, after Olivia had gone to bed, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth. I waited until she fell asleep, her phone resting on the bedside table. My heart pounded in my chest as I quietly reached for it, hoping she wouldn't wake up. She had set a passcode on the phone, but I knew her well enough to guess it on the second try. My fingers moved quickly, and soon I was scrolling through her messages. There it was, an entire conversation thread with Sam that spanned weeks. As I read through the texts, the pit in my stomach grew deeper. The messages started off harmless enough, discussing Alex or making small talk. But as I scrolled further, the tone changed. Flirty remarks, subtle hints of something more, and then plans to meet up while I was away with Alex. She had covered it up by calling them work dinners or client meetings. All this time, I had believed her lies. There were no explicit confessions of an affair, no photos or messages that outright stated what I feared. But there was enough between the lines to confirm what I had been dreading. They weren't just texting about Alex or friendly dinners. They were planning times to meet, times when I wasn't home. One message stood out among the rest. I can't wait to see you again. We need to be more careful next time. Don't want anyone finding out. That message hit me like a punch in the gut. I could feel my world crumbling around me as I realized the full extent of their betrayal. As much as I wanted to storm into the bedroom and confront Olivia right then and there, I held back. I needed more than just messages. I needed undeniable proof. If I acted too soon, she would deny it, twist the story, and somehow make me doubt what I had seen. So, I put the phone back on the table and quietly left the room, my mind racing with a plan to uncover the truth once and for all. The next few weeks were torture. I watched Olivia closely, noticing every small detail, how she smiled when a message popped up on her phone, how she seemed distracted during our conversations, how she avoided my eyes when Sam's name came up in passing. My suspicions were now undeniable, and I knew I couldn't live like this anymore. I began taking steps to catch them in the act. I needed to know how deep this betrayal went. It wasn't enough to suspect. I needed concrete evidence. If Olivia and Sam had crossed the line, I would make sure there was no way for either of them to deny it. But the thought of what I might uncover terrified me. I wasn't just risking my marriage. I was risking the family we had built together, and I had no idea if I was ready to face the truth. A few weeks after discovering the messages between Olivia and Sam, things took a more sinister turn. Olivia told me she had to go on a business trip, a last-minute meeting with an important client in another state. It wasn't unusual for her job in sales to require travel, so I didn't question it. She seemed calm, maybe even relieved, as she packed her bags, but something about the timing didn't sit right with me. I had just started noticing her texting Sam late into the night, and now, suddenly, she was going to be away for a few days. Olivia left early on a Friday morning, kissing me goodbye and reminding me she would be gone for 3 days. She promised to call as soon as she arrived at her hotel. This new client could be huge for us, she said, her voice full of excitement. I wanted to believe her, to trust that this trip was just another routine work obligation. But after everything I'd uncovered recently, my instincts screamed otherwise. That evening, as I sat alone at home, I couldn't stop thinking about those texts I had found on her phone. It all seemed too convenient. I knew Sam wasn't at our house. Alex and I had played golf with him earlier in the day before Olivia left. But something still felt off. Later that night, I decided to give Olivia a call, just to check in. Her phone rang, but she didn't pick up. I told myself she was probably in a meeting, or maybe out for dinner with the client. But the knot in my stomach only grew tighter. The next day, things got stranger. Olivia finally called, her voice chipper as she talked about how well the meeting had gone. She described the client in vague terms, mentioning that they were interested in the product, but she never gave specifics. Usually, Olivia liked to talk about the details, what the client said, how the meeting went, and what the next steps would be. This time, her answers were short, and when I asked what her plans were for the rest of the weekend, she simply said, "I'm just going to relax at the hotel and catch up on some emails." The conversation felt rehearsed, as if she had prepared what to say in advance. After we hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to push it out of my mind, but the unease lingered. Later that evening, I was scrolling through social media when I noticed something odd. Sam had posted a picture of himself at a beach resort, one of those places that Olivia and I had always talked about visiting but never did. The location tag caught my attention immediately. It was in the same state where Olivia claimed she was meeting her client. My heart sank. Was it just a coincidence? Or had they planned this together, hiding behind the pretense of a business trip? I knew I couldn't let this go, so I started digging deeper. I checked Olivia's emails, which she had left open on her laptop at home. There were no work-related messages about this so-called client, no flight confirmations, and no meeting agendas. It was as if the entire trip was fabricated. Panic set in. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. Olivia had lied to me. She wasn't on a business trip at all. She was with Sam. The realization hit me like a freight train. I felt sick to my stomach as the truth slowly sank in. All those messages, the secretive texts, the sudden increase in business trips, it had all been part of their plan to be together behind my back. I needed proof, something undeniable. I called the hotel where Olivia claimed she was staying. After a brief hold, the front desk informed me that no one by her name was checked in. My blood ran cold. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and devastation. When Olivia returned home 2 days later, she acted as if nothing had happened. She greeted me with a smile, claiming the trip had been a huge success. The client loved the product, she said, her eyes sparkling with satisfaction, but I could barely look at her. Every word that came out of her mouth felt like another lie, another twist of the knife. I nodded along, pretending to believe her, but inside, I was falling apart. I didn't confront her right away. I knew I needed to stay calm, to gather more evidence before making any accusations. I couldn't afford to let my emotions take over, not yet. So, I played along, letting her think that I believed every word of her fabricated story. But I was already planning my next move. I needed to catch them in the act, to leave no room for denial. The business trip that wasn't had confirmed my worst fears. Olivia and Sam had crossed a line, and there was no going back. My world, once built on trust and love, was now crumbling beneath the weight of their lies. I spent the next few weeks in a state of emotional limbo, torn between anger, heartbreak, and the need for proof. I could no longer look at Olivia the same way, but I knew confronting her without hard evidence would only give her a chance to manipulate the situation. Every time I saw her texting or taking phone calls in hushed tones, my suspicions grew, and I could barely stand being in the same room with her. But I waited, carefully planning for the moment when I would catch them both red-handed. The opportunity came when Alex suggested we go play golf one Sunday morning. It was our usual weekend routine, an escape for both of us, father and son bonding over the game. Olivia, as expected, was staying home, claiming she had work to catch up on. I knew this was my chance. If Sam showed up at our house while we were gone, it would confirm everything. That morning, as Alex and I left for the golf course, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. Alex was in a good mood, excited to spend time together, unaware of the storm brewing around us. I tried to keep up the facade of normalcy, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't stop thinking about what I might find when we returned. We played for a few hours, but I was distracted the entire time. After finishing our game, Alex suggested we grab lunch, but I told him I wasn't feeling well and needed to head back home. He didn't question it and drove us back in silence. The knot in my stomach tightened as we pulled into the driveway. I didn't know what I was about to walk into, but I was ready. As soon as I entered the house, I heard muffled voices coming from the living room. My heart raced, and I felt my hands start to tremble. I motioned for Alex to stay in the hallway as I moved closer to the voices. And there they were, Olivia and Sam, sitting far too close on the couch, laughing softly, completely unaware that I had come home early. Their laughter died the moment they saw me standing there, frozen in the doorway. The air in the room changed instantly. Olivia's face went pale, her smile fading into an expression of shock and fear. Sam's eyes darted between me and Olivia, as if trying to figure out how to explain their presence. The tension was thick, and the truth was written all over their faces. I didn't need to hear their excuses. I had caught them in the act. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice low but full of barely controlled rage. Olivia opened her mouth, stammering to find words, but nothing came out. Sam, looking more like a deer caught in headlights, said nothing. I took a step closer, unable to hide the anger boiling inside me. "Answer me," I demanded, my voice rising. "It's not what you think," Olivia finally blurted out, her voice trembling. "We were just talking. Sam stopped by to see if Alex was home. I swear, nothing happened." I could feel my blood pounding in my ears. The lies, the deception, it was all too much. They weren't fooling anyone, least of all me. "Just talking," I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think I'm that stupid? I've seen the messages. I know you've been lying to me for weeks, maybe months. Olivia's eyes widened in panic. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked under the weight of the truth. She knew she was caught, and there was no way out of it. Sam remained silent, his face red with embarrassment, clearly regretting every choice that had led him to this moment. I looked at Sam, who still hadn't said a word. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and firm. He hesitated for a moment, then quickly stood up, avoiding eye contact with both of us. Without another word, he hurried out the door, leaving Olivia and me alone in the suffocating silence. As the door closed behind him, I turned my attention to Olivia. The woman I had loved for over 20 years, the mother of my children, stood before me, broken and ashamed. She tried to reach for me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, let me explain," she begged. "I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. It was just a stupid fling. I was lonely and I held up my hand to stop her. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't try to justify this. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and you did it in our home. How could you?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she struggled to speak. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did." I stared at her, feeling a mixture of anger, disgust, and sadness. Her words felt hollow. The woman standing before me was no longer the person I had built a life with. She was a stranger now, someone capable of deceiving me in the worst way possible. "There's no coming back from this, Olivia," I said, my voice calmer now, though the pain was still raw. "I trusted you. I believed in you. And you threw it all away." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but I felt nothing. I had given her everything, and in return, she had given herself to someone else. The betrayal was too deep, too unforgivable. I turned and walked out of the living room, leaving her crying behind me. As I stepped into the hallway, Alex stood there, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock. He had heard everything. "Dad, what's going on?" he asked, his voice shaky. I looked at my son, realizing how this would change everything for him too. His best friend, his mother, both of them had betrayed us in the most unimaginable way. "We need to talk," I said, my voice heavy with the weight of what had just happened. "But not here." Together, we left the house, the silence between us thick with the realization that nothing would ever be the same again. In the days that followed, the weight of Olivia's betrayal bore down on me like a storm cloud that refused to lift. Every room in the house felt suffocating, filled with memories that now seemed tainted. I couldn't escape the endless loop of replaying that moment in the living room, seeing her and Sam together, hearing her weak excuses, and watching the woman I thought I knew collapse under the guilt of what she had done. Alex hadn't spoken much since that day. He was devastated. His best friend, someone he trusted and shared his life with, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. And his mother, how could she do something like this? He stayed in his room most of the time, barely eating, barely talking. I tried to give him space, but the silence between us felt like a physical wall, something we didn't know how to break through. The worst part was that the house felt like a prison. Olivia tried to talk to me, tried to explain, but her words only made things worse. "It didn't mean anything," she kept saying, as if that would somehow soften the blow. But that was the problem. It did mean something. It meant our marriage was broken. It meant the trust we had spent years building was gone. It meant that our family, the one we had worked so hard to create, was shattered. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. I saw Olivia laughing with Sam, touching his arm, acting like a woman I no longer recognized. How long had it been going on? Had it started months ago? Or was it even longer? I started questioning every interaction, every smile she had given Sam, every time she had mentioned his name in casual conversation. The paranoia was overwhelming. I could see Olivia struggling too. She moved around the house like a ghost, her eyes puffy and red from crying, her voice soft and trembling whenever she tried to speak to me. But I couldn't forgive her. Not now. Maybe not ever. She wanted us to move past this, to heal, but how could we? Every time I looked at her, all I could see was the woman who had lied to me, the woman who had chosen to be with someone else. One evening, about a week after I caught them, Olivia tried again to explain herself. We sat at the dinner table, the silence thick between us. She looked at me with pleading eyes, her hands trembling as she spoke. "I never wanted this to happen," she said softly. "I love you. I love our family. But I got lost. I don't know why I did what I did, but it doesn't change how much I care about you and Alex." Her words felt hollow, like they were coming from a place of desperation rather than truth. I could see the pain in her eyes, but it wasn't enough to erase what had happened. "How can you say that?" I replied, my voice quiet but firm. "You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything. You broke Alex's heart. You broke mine. And for what? For some fling with a kid who was supposed to be like family?" She burst into tears, her shoulders shaking as she covered her face with her hands. I wanted to feel sympathy, wanted to reach out and comfort her, but I couldn't. My anger was still too raw, too overwhelming. "I didn't want to hurt you," she sobbed. "It just happened. I was lonely. I don't know, looking for something that wasn't there anymore. But it was a mistake, and I regret it more than you can imagine." A mistake. That's what she kept calling it, like it was some minor error that could be fixed with time. But this wasn't something that could be undone. The damage was too deep. There was no rewind button that could erase the betrayal, no apology that could make me forget. After a long silence, I finally spoke again, my voice colder than I intended. "You need to leave." Olivia's head snapped up, her tear-filled eyes wide with shock. "What? You can't mean that." "I do," I said, my resolve hardening. "I can't live like this. Not after what you've done." She stared at me, her face crumpling in disbelief. "Where would I go? What about Alex? What about us?" "There is no us anymore," I said, the words slicing through the air like a knife. "You ended that when you decided to be with Sam. As for Alex, you've hurt him enough already. The best thing you can do is give him space, and let us try to figure this out without you here." Olivia stood slowly, her body shaking with sobs as she walked toward the door. She paused for a moment, looking back at me as if waiting for me to stop her. But I didn't. I couldn't. She left the house, and with her departure, a heavy silence settled in. Alex came downstairs later that night, his face a mask of pain and confusion. "Is she gone?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "For now," I said, not knowing what else to say. We sat together in the living room, the weight of what had happened pressing down on us both. As we sat in the quiet house, I realized how much we had lost. The betrayal wasn't just between Olivia and me. It had torn our family apart. The woman I had built my life with was gone, and in her place was someone I barely recognized. The devastation ran deep, and I wasn't sure if we'd ever truly recover. In the days following Olivia's departure, I was consumed by a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and betrayal. I tried to focus on Alex, to be strong for him, but the pain wouldn't subside. It gnawed at me constantly, and no matter how much I wanted to move past it, the resentment festered. Every corner of the house reminded me of her and what she had done, and I began to crave an outlet, a way to reclaim some control over the wreckage of my life. That's when Sophia, our young and attractive neighbor, came into the picture. She had always been friendly, often stopping by to chat over the fence or share a cup of coffee. She was vibrant, full of energy, and in her early 30s, much younger than me, but we had always shared good conversation. After Olivia left, I noticed Sophia checking in on me more often, asking how I was holding up, offering a listening ear when I needed one. Her company was a welcome distraction from the emptiness of the house. One evening, Sophia came by with a bottle of wine, offering to share it since she knew I was going through a tough time. It seemed harmless at first, just a neighborly gesture, but as the night wore on and the wine flowed, the conversation turned more personal. We laughed together, talked about life, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something other than pain. She made me feel seen, wanted. In my vulnerable state, that was all it took. As the night deepened, the line between comfort and something more blurred. I knew what was happening, and I didn't stop it. I didn't want to. I told myself it wasn't about revenge, that it wasn't about Olivia or Sam. But deep down, I knew better. This was my way of getting back at her. If she could betray me, then why couldn't I do the same? I wasn't looking for love, or even a new relationship. I was looking for a way to dull the pain, even if just for a night. The next morning, I woke up feeling conflicted. On one hand, I had done what I thought would make me feel better, but the satisfaction was fleeting. Sophia was kind, understanding, but it didn't change the fact that what I had done was driven by bitterness. I wasn't proud of it, but in that moment, it felt like the only way to even the score. But as I sat in the quiet of the morning, I realized something important. No amount of revenge could erase the damage that had been done. In the days after my encounter with Sophia, the initial rush of revenge faded, leaving me feeling hollow and lost. The truth settled in. I had only added another layer of complexity to an already shattered life. The affair hadn't healed the pain Olivia had caused. Instead, it served as a reminder that no act, no matter how vengeful, could undo the devastation that betrayal had left behind. The house, once full of warmth and laughter, felt cold and empty. Olivia was gone, and her absence was palpable. Alex had distanced himself, spending more time out of the house, avoiding the tension that lingered between us. He was hurt not only by his mother's actions, but by the disintegration of the family he once believed was unbreakable. I knew he was struggling, but I didn't know how to help him. I was barely keeping myself together. Every time I saw Alex, I saw the pain in his eyes, the pain of losing both his best friend and the trust he had in his mother. Our conversations had become brief and strained, as if neither of us knew how to address the elephant in the room. The betrayal had torn a rift between us that I feared might never heal. Olivia tried reaching out a few times. She left messages, apologizing again, saying she wanted to make things right, that we could work through this if we just gave it time. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. There was no working through something like this. The love we once shared had been built on trust, and that trust was now irreparably broken. I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to forgive her. As for Sophia, we kept our distance after that night. It was an unspoken agreement. She understood that what had happened between us was a mistake, a reaction to the pain rather than a genuine connection. There was no future there, and we both knew it. One evening, after days of avoiding the inevitable, Alex and I finally sat down to talk. His voice was quiet, his words heavy with emotion. "Dad, what's going to happen now?" he asked, his eyes full of uncertainty. I didn't have an answer. The family we once had was broken, and I didn't know how to fix it. But I knew one thing. We couldn't go back to the way things were. The damage was too deep, and the only way forward was to accept that the life we had known was gone. "We'll figure it out," I said, though I wasn't sure how. "But it's going to take time." The reality was, the home we had once built together was no longer a place of love and security. It was a place of broken trust, painful memories, and shattered bonds. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew that moving forward, we would have to rebuild from the ruins of what Olivia's betrayal had left behind.